Yeah, I'm a correspondent here in New York since 25 years. I covered US politics for a very, very long time. I'm working for Austrian clients and in Germany for Bild. So I'm kind of busy nonstop with all the news since decades now.
News is a good buzzword, by the way. Of course, we will not go for the most actual news between the United States, of course, as is, the big blonde man now back in office. But we will cover that one because we would like to address a bit like how does the cultural differences between the United States and America, or Europe, of course, what were the similarities? I'm a scientist, will of course ask a bit how science is going ahead and have a bit of an outlook into the future. And so now let me just ask you bluntly, I heard that you have changed your opinion a bit connected to the big old man that is now back in office.
Well, yeah, Donald Trump, a story that's dominating U.S. politics since 9 years now. He famously came down the escalator in Trump Tower somewhere in 2015, and as we know now, changed U.S. politics and world politics forever. I reacted at the first time around pretty much like most kind of liberal journalists do. I did not like any of it, not the person, not the policies, nothing really. I was basically kind of suffering, quote unquote, through the first Trump term. Even though, of course, on the other hand, I'm a journalist, so it keeps me busy as well. So lots of stories, obviously. And I was relieved when Joe Biden was elected 4 years ago, after some of these turbulent Trump years. We all know it's the end of the Trump term was, of course, the COVID pandemic, which is certainly not his fault that it started in the US. There were some discussions about certain ideas he had during the pandemic, which some of them, if you look back in time, were not as quote unquote stupid as most opinion leaders thought they were. Also, I did realize that in the beginning of the Biden years, of course, we were all hoping, things go back to normal. I mean, the whole idea was, he called him Sleepy Joe, which was a mistake because that's exactly what America wanted. They just wanted to sleep through a night without woken up by crazy tweets and stuff like that. So that worked a little bit in the beginning, but then you started realizing that Joe Biden is just not really addressing a majority of American people. He actually copied Trump's playbook by, after being elected, normally US presidents try to govern from the middle. They go in the middle and, that enhances their popularity. Donald Trump did never do that. He always stick to his right course. He always stuck with his base, and never kind of changed in the middle, never moderated really. And next thing you know, Joe Biden kind of did the same thing. So he stayed on the left. And so what he didn't realize, or what his government didn't realize, that they made politics that wasn't really resonating with the majority of American voters who were struggling over certain things like high prices, inflation. And then, of course, the main thing was really that puzzles everybody to this date. Like, why did they open the border like that? Why did they allow enormous amount of migrants to come here in the United States, the most of them illegally? It's kind of puzzling. The numbers went up 3 to 4 times compared to Trump, and then comes the thing, also to Obama. Obama was very strict at the border. He was a Democrat too. He got criticized from his own base, but he did realize that there is a certain amount that American people can stomach, or the American economy can stomach. But this is what Joe Biden kind of didn't realize, and then it started. All the problems started. You had tens of thousands of migrants who came in this country illegally, being shipped to New York, being bused to New York, staying here in hotels, receiving a lot of things, and that really kind of made people angry. But that was not my personal kind of experience to turn me a little bit towards Donald Trump. It was the trials against him, the fervor of the Biden administration to get him with the courts, with the special prosecutor, and especially that trial in New York, which was about hush money payments to a former porn star, which allegedly had an affair with. That was 5 weeks. He was sitting there in his courtroom every day, and it's a very depressing courtroom. It shouldn't be like a sob story how poor Donald Trump was, but it's an illustration. And the more this case went forward, you realized how constructed it was. It was kind of like really the legal case, just to get Trump by any means whatsoever. Then the jury made their verdict, and then of course the Democrats said, look, he's a convicted felon now. So basically they got what they wanted. Did that work out? Did American people care in the election? They didn't. And this was not the issue that galvanized American voters. And then came the election, and it was a resounding win. I mean, you can define earth-shattering political events or landslide victories. You can argue if it was a landslide victory, but it was certainly a lot more decisive than anybody thought, except I guess Trump's people. So the American people have spoken, and now, of course, he started his new term with a expected avalanche of mostly controversial presidential decrees and decisions. But this is where we are, and I'm kind of changed a little bit. Also, what I have to add to this. One must say that after he was nearly killed in this field in Pennsylvania last summer, where the bullet grazed his ear, and we all know that if he wouldn't have turned his head, he would be dead. The bullet would have gone straight in his head. The way he reacted to that was, some people say it was like a hero, but it was courageous, and it commanded also my respect. Somebody who has an experience like that and gets up on his feet and said, does the fist and says fight, fight, fight. That was pretty impressive, and that impressed a lot of people as well. And then Trump in the election campaign, he also did very smart moves. He stayed away from the mainstream media, which was completely in the corner with Kamala Harris, which I find nearly tragic what the media was doing there. So he went on these alternative news sources, news platforms like Joe Rogan, and gave interviews there, and that helped him as well. Bottom line was he did gain literally any group in the United electorate, anything from African Americans. He did really well with Hispanics, which seems for many viewers from Europe seems surprising because most of his directives are directed against the Latino population coming in this country. But the one that were already here, they basically didn't like the open border either. So they voted for Trump. He made progress with other minorities as well, and even women. Sure, he lost the women vote, but it wasn't as decisive as the polls suggested. So even a lot of women voted for him as well.
So they say that Joe Biden was the last European that left office in that sense in the United States. So with Trump, you get the impression there's really a tectonic rift in one way or the other. Since you are a European now living in the United States, maybe help us a bit to understand really, if you put Biden in a European perspective and would put him as a European politician or Trump as a European politician, where would that be? I mean, the Social Democrats, as we always understand for the Americans, a bit like a communist party in one way or the other, right? And the right-wing party for the Americans is like middle or midstream. So how would these two people rate compared to the European political establishment?
Yeah, I mean, of course, political landscape in the US is dominated by two big parties, which is very different to Europe, where you have many parties forming coalitions and all these things. So there's really the Democrats and the Republicans. And from a European's perspective, I would, most people would say the Democrats already would be like a middle center conservative party in Europe. And the Republican Party would be to the right of that. So basically, the entire left spectrum is not very well covered by any major party in the United States. Of course, the Democrats under Biden moved to the left. They basically tried to cover a lot of demands coming from the progressive base, from the left side of their party. But basically, there is just no real political larger party representing real progressives like that. So that's one difference. The other choice that Donald Trump made from his start of political. He basically became a different politician because with his America First priority agenda. And that, of course, is a red flag for everybody in Europe and around the world. But from the perspective of an American leader, it is not so outrageous. I mean, Donald Trump was the first one who said, like, why don't we look after ourselves first instead of, helping the entire world? And that resonated very well with the U.S. people. John Bolton, the former advisor from Donald Trump, told me recently that basically it's not a big surprise that America is, by the large population, a center-right country as far as the population is concerned. So a win by a Republican is not outrageous, or is not very surprising. Of course, Donald Trump brings his own style to the table, and sure, he will be held accountable in the next weeks, month, maybe years, how much of his election promises he can actually nail down. And it's also a very complicated country, and he's just about to find out that whatever he tries, there's always somebody who blocks it. We had we had situations with immigration, with deportation flights. Other countries don't refuse them. Donald Trump has to deal with it. So we will see. We'll see how effective. But bottom line is, at the beginning of his term, a majority of American people stands behind him, and that was never the case with Donald Trump. He hardly ever reached 50% approval rating. Even as a president, he never reached that. He has an approval rating now of 53, 54%. So there is a lot of goodwill, and we will see how the American people like it. So far they do. So far they do. As far as Trump supporters are concerned, of course, the other half of the United States sometimes goes bonkers.
If we try to use figureheads, and we take modern figureheads, so I take like Friedrich Merz, like the German opposition leader at the moment, which most likely becomes the next chancellor, like saying, as you just said, a conservative middle. Would it be like Sleepy Joe, if you just call him Sleepy Joe? And then would be Donald Trump more like Viktor Orban, like on the right spectrum and the populist?
Well, yes. I mean, Joe Biden certainly was basically a European, could be seen as a European style politician. He really cared deeply, and I commend that. He cared deeply about the connections that America had with the world. Basically, the approach really couldn't be more different. Joe Biden's approach is, let's get all together, let's try to figure things out. That's one thing. Donald Trump, of course, is like, hey, I'm looking after my country. You basically do what I want, or there are consequences. It's more like a bully strategy. Which one can work? Who knows? I mean, Joe Biden appeared, not only because of his age, but also because of his politics, weak. He would always negotiate. He would never threaten anyone. And in the new world we live in, which is kind of drifting into geostrategic blocks, like, Russia, China, Iran, bad guys, so to say, and the West, the more liberal West, a more forceful American president could achieve something on the global stage, is my belief, because that is really a macho world out there. If you look at Putin, Xi, Kim Jong-un, those guys, they sometimes you could argue that they would understand the threat coming from Trump and carry it forward in a serious manner. They could carry this. They could react to these threats. More than, let's say, Biden with his G7 summits, and they do what's expected. They approved more weapons for Ukraine, all good, but never in a way that was a game changer. And Donald Trump tries to be a game changer. That's for sure.
So speaking about cultural differences, there's always lots of America within Europe, right? I mean, Europeans look at Hollywood, of course. They look at the latest trends. They look, of course, at the politics, what's going on there and stuff like that, right? After all, it's like the big brother on the west of the pond. But how much is there really for how much of Europe is within the Americas? So how much do they look to the East, like saying, oh, this is our history and this is where we all come from and this is our closest allies, or is this like completely gone?
Well, I mean, I'm sometimes surprised like how European America is, like people always see it as this is a completely different system and everything. But there's a lot of things they are like Europe. I mean, environmental laws, the social net, there is a social net in the United States. It's not like, you fall through immediately. That's all there. So in this respect, it's very much like a European country. Then on the other hand, you have strong contrasts. There's a more independent thinking in the United States. It's instilled in Americans to forge your own way. Don't rely on others. It's more individualism here in the United States, and it's also when it comes to migration, and that's the part that I'm still torn inside, because migration is what made America what it is, and you can also feel when you speak to people. They tolerate you more when you're from overseas. They really don't care in the US. There's not this whole baggage, oh, is he really from this country? But they really, especially here in New York, of course, they really care about, can you do it? Are you good? Do you have skills? And that's a difference, I think. I think Europe is still like a little bit, okay, this guy is like from France. What is he doing here? And this guy is from Finland. It's like, what? Right, so this I find a little bit less. But then, of course, you have a segment of the population who is not very tolerant. Obviously, a major difference also is America is armed in a way that's not a good thing. Obviously, that's very, very different to Europe. But I mean, I would say under the hood of these two continents, they're not that different.
Yeah. I think Bill Clinton is quoted for stating it's the economy, stupid, which makes you win or lose elections, which we have just proven now with Donald Trump, apparently. But how much is this really embedded in the American way of thinking? How much does economy play really a role for one normal person's life?
I mean, it's an interesting subject, because Joe Biden touted his numbers, and they were, if you look at it from an economist standpoint, they were all great. Stock market was up. There was robust growth in America, much more than in Europe. The unemployment was basically you have unemployment like in the 3-4% range, which is basically like everybody who wants to find a job can find a job. So the labor market was extremely good. But at the same time, what the Biden administration did not realize is that everything was 30, 40, 50% more expensive than before the pandemic. And that was some of these trends, they were global, not much that Joe Biden could have done, but he did, in the opinion of many experts, did make one mistake by adding another $2 trillion into the economy with his last big COVID package. So he basically, and that was timed at the wrong time, because the economy was already starting up from COVID. There were supply chains issues, and all of a sudden he just dumped enormous amounts of money on the American people, in the American economy, for a very limited supply. So that exacerbated the problem, made goods more expensive, because too many people wanted to buy one thing and it wasn't there, because the whole world economy was still fragile under COVID, and that basically pushed the inflation higher. Of course, that also pushed interest rates higher, which went up a lot higher than in Europe. And I don't know what the European number is, but in the US, we went close to 5% interest rates. I think Europe maybe like 2%. And that's also a signal that the inflation was bad in the U.S. And people said, like, yeah, it's great. I mean, people on Wall Street getting rich, investors getting rich, and I'm going to the supermarket and I can buy X. So the failure of the Biden administration to level with the American people also contributed to Trump's success. I mean, everything that was not okay, they would never level. They would either talk about something else or say nothing. And that of course was not enough for the American people. They said, like, look, we just want to have affordable life. I mean, that also extends to people couldn't buy, young people cannot buy a home. The entire framework of the American dream was shattered, and the people in charge denied it. And they were talking in the election campaign. The next big mistake, of course, they were not talking about themselves, what they have done for the country, and what they're planning to do. Zero. They only talked about how horrible Donald Trump is. And that did not work in the year 2016 with Hillary Clinton, and it certainly did not work with Kamala Harris, which of course was, as most political observers say, was not a very astute political candidate, very effective candidate. She came across as unauthentic and basically like a little bit like a fake candidate.
I just stumbled upon the topic of this economy and how much things really costs with my daughter now going over there. She just went 2 weeks ago to Wyoming to do a PhD. And I just found out, luckily, she has like a paid PhD. She doesn't have to pay it for herself. But if she would have, the tuition fee would have been $11,000 per semester. So I would assume this plays a huge difference between somebody in Europe and in the United States. Like, you would have to pay the tuition fee for your children. You have to make sure you have proper social welfare. You have to take care of your pension and stuff like that, which is everything we Europeans mostly get granted, right? So is this something that's ticking constantly in the head of a typical American?
Well, it's ticking in my head constantly every day because I have two kids.
Ouch!
And my daughter is just about to choose a college. There's some of these college prices are $100,000 a semester, which of course that's daylight robbery. I mean, of course, it's not actually what you pay. You get subsidies from this and this. But even if you pay half of it, you're sending a kid to walk away with 4 years of college with $250,000 debt. And then most of what the kids study is something that not for a profession where you can actually ever make that. I mean, if you become a doctor or an engineer or an architect, that's all good. But I mean, most of the kids, study media studies and, psychology and philosophy and so that's a real thing. I mean, let's put it this way. There's a couple of things in the US, they should not be organized capitalistically, but they are. That starts with healthcare. Of course, I mean, the hospitals directors walk away with $1 million salaries, where everybody else holds the bag. Pharmaceutical industries can make as much money as they want. They charge prices that every European would just fall to the floor in astonishment, but how much things cost here. So the same is education. You basically apply capitalistic theories onto the entire education field. That's what you get. You get $100,000 because still kids want to go to college. There's a high demand, and it seems like universities can charge whatever they want. So that will be my thing. But it is the US. It is the country of capitalism. Everything is organized that way. But it's tough. It is tough.
But why isn't there so much resistance against this famous Obamacare? Why is there so much resistance against social welfare?
Well, Obamacare, I'm not quite sure if Trump really wants to go after Obamacare now because so many people have it and it's quite popular. The idea was why so many people in the economy went against it, because companies needed to provide for the first time health coverage for their employees. And they were not obliged to do that before. That's another difference to Europe, I guess. I mean, if you have a job, you have to be insured, right? That was different. So a lot of small companies they went crazy about it. They said like, look, I can't afford paying health insurance now for my workers, of all my workers. So that was one part of the resistance. And the other part, of course, is ideological, that a lot of Republicans see this as socialized medicine. They basically, their idea is that, only people can afford it should be healthy or should be treated or something. I'm paraphrasing, that's not exactly, but towards that direction. But I mean, I hope I'm on Obamacare. So I hope nothing, even though I see Donald Trump more sympathetic than before, I hope nothing happens on this front. And that's my wife likes to point out as well.
It's maybe too late, right, to stop the train and move it in the opposite direction, right? It's maybe gone, right?
Yeah, let's see. I think Obamacare will be a tough. I'm not quite sure. I haven't heard it a lot in the first week, in the first days, so I'm not quite sure if this gets through, because you also need a subtle majority in the Congress, which no party had since a quarter century. So it's not so easy to change, but we'll see what he does on that front.
Mm-hmm. So when we talk about culture before, it's like the heritage plays a certain role, so that people ask you where you're coming from. But in the end, it's not really like a huge difference. Not like in Europe, right? You could live like in a part of Austria, Waldviertel, you know what I'm talking about, like a remote area to the north. For people who don't know that, very alpine, 100,000 meters elevation, and even if you're like the grandson of somebody who was born there, you're still like the immigrant, which I think that doesn't happen in the United States, right? But after 10 years, you're not like a United States citizen, right? So this is not a major thing over there, most likely, right? Or is it somehow?
No, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, I live in New York, so we always say everyone is from everywhere. So, which is true, there's people ask me in the beginning when I was in the United States, what I think, how I cope with the New York accent. And I didn't know how to answer that question, because I don't know what it was. I thought, what do you mean? Is it like Indian, Chinese, Russian, European, French? What are you talking about? I know now what they mean. They talk about a certain type of Brooklyn accent that come to my office, and that's what they actually mean. But what I'm trying to say is that it really, like, it is everyone is from everywhere, and it's completely normal. You go in a place and there's Germans sitting on the table speaking in German, and it's not only in New York, all in other places too. I did a lot of travel in the US in the last years, and I was always surprised that you just completely normally meet Germans, French, Italians from living there, So that's kind of what I really appreciate about America. That's and I hope that this be carried forward. This philosophy and ideas being carried forward by Trump as well. And he did say that he's not against migration per se. He's against illegal migration, and you can make a point there. I mean, if you start your stay in a country with a crime, it's not. I understand the circumstances, and I covered the border as well. I've seen the human aspect of it. People coming across, falling on their knees, making the cross. We made it to America and stuff. I understand all that, but what happened in the last years was just too much of it, and the Democrats paid the price for it. And let's see. But I do hope that Donald Trump also understands. That America America is special. The United States is special because of migration, and that's my big hope here.
The more Europe is integrating and becoming like one, a bit like similar to the United States somehow, right? At least we're moving slowly into such a federated state. I'm always asking myself, how much is the United States really federated? Like, how much is a Californian comparable to somebody who's living in New York? Maybe they're pretty comparable because they're both on the edges, and they're a bit like traders and looking over the horizon. But somebody from Wyoming or somebody from Texas, maybe completely different, right? How much is the differences in the states? How much homogeneous is that country?
Well, of course, I mean, you have the big overarching bracket, which is the federal level, federal laws. But I do believe that most of the power is still concentrated in U.S. states. And you saw this also very, very clearly during the pandemic, that certain states has different rules. It's not in the beginning, because in the beginning it was scary and everything. But towards the second year, the third year, basically states in the South, like Florida, Texas, you say like, okay, we're done with the COVID measures. Let's open our economy. Let's be done. Like off with the mask and everything. And people in New York and California, they were still bombarded with immunization threats and mask and everything. And then at the end of the day, actually, less people died in Florida and Texas than they did in New York. So in this case, what I'm trying to say is there is a lot of leeway in the states, and so also Donald Trump on the federal level will realize that there's going to be pushback in certain democratic states, like here in New York, for example, or in Los Angeles, and you already feel that these cities also have laws to actually protect illegal migrants, as crazy as that sounds. So that means they call sanctuary cities. So that means the local authorities will not try not to cooperate with the federal authorities. For example, ICE, which is the unit that deports people, and that's another for me personally a kind of fascinating aspect of the U.S. that sometimes the local and the federal are in a collision course. And of course, drug policy, for example. I mean, nearly half or even more of the United States allow marijuana on recreational levels as well. You can go to a weed store, no problem. But at the same time, at the federal level, it's still illegal. It's still an illegal drug. So that's causing some frictions and some problems. But it's always like a balance between federal rule and local rules. And yes, and these states are very different. Now, of course, the other thing is abortion limitations. That has kind of halved America. You have many states in the South who restricted abortions dramatically and or like outlawed them outright. And then you have other states like the more liberal states where it's still allowed. So you can see it's always like a tug of war between the two sides.
One thing that's also very controversial is debated within Europe at the moment is like how much power does Donald Trump really have? He has the House of Representatives at the moment. He has the House of Senate. The Supreme Court somehow is also leaning towards him. So is the system of checks and balances now completely obsolete, or is it still there?
Well, let's start with the Senate, with Congress, right? He has a very narrow majority in the House of Representatives. It's actually just one. He can only lose one vote there. That could create problems. He has a better majority in the Senate, but in the Senate you sometimes need for most really consequential laws, you need actually a 60% majority to break. It's a procedural rule called the filibuster. It's a long story, but you need 60% in the Senate to overcome a filibuster challenge, and that makes Congress so muted actually and so dysfunctional, because it is very hard. A lot harder than in Europe. If a coalition has a reform project, I mean, they have the votes, they go to parliament and ratify it, and that's it. But here you really have to have a majority that nobody has in America anymore. It's a very politically polarized country. So the only exemption in Congress is anything to do with budgetary items. So he can get a lot done on that level. Through budgetary reconciliation, I think is the word. It's very technical, but that's the only way that he can push through some of his more controversial laws if they apply to any budgetary issues. As far as the Supreme Court is concerned, that of course is a big asset, because it's not only leaning towards Trump. I mean, he kind of has it in the pocket. He was, from his point of view, lucky enough to name 3 of the 9 judges during his first term, which completely changed the Supreme Court to a 6-3 majority of conservatives. So in most cases, Trump, and you could also see this when it came to his law, to his trials, to his legal problems, the Supreme Court helped him out a lot. So that's an asset. But sure, he has a very ambitious agenda. He wants to implement it very quickly, but he will also realize that some things will take place. And there are some Republicans who already kind of not happy that he pardoned the 1,500 of his supporters who stormed the Capitol and attacked police officers. So I mean, it was a promise to his base, and Donald Trump is very loyal. He's loyal to his base, and his base is loyal to him. So that was a political move. Sure, he knows himself that some of these guys should not have been pardoned because they did horrible things. But he basically said, okay, that's my political gesture. But you did see within the Republican Party, even though it's very much under control by Donald Trump, there are some voices who say like, okay, let's, And then of course, I mean, he will try to limit the overview of more independent people of the Congress and political system. I mean, he just fired all the independent inspector generals, 21 of them, in a kind of Friday evening purge. So those are things that people will look out for. Of course, right? I mean, yeah. I mean, of course, people said that the Democratic side said during the hysterical final of the election that Donald Trump is equal to Adolf Hitler. He's a Nazi. He will end American democracy. He will be a dictator forever. So that, of course, is completely overblown. But there is a little worry in many people. It's like, because we know one thing about Donald Trump, he likes power. He's very power hungry, and we'll see what kind of borders there will be set for him, some limits.
Do you expect, like in the next 2 years, we're going to have the midterm elections? And if the usual thing is then, of course, that the midterm elections that the party that's in power suddenly gets a blowback, right? Again, and then the others are like pushed forward. So if this happens again, do you expect like Donald Trump to play capital rush 2.0 again and like trying to get his comrades to make sure that this does not happen in a way?
No, I don't see it. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't really see that dictatorial aspect of that he really wants to do that. I think he's happy that he had a really big election win, and he wants to implement whatever he promised. But of course, there are certain streaks of him. They seem authoritarian. What bothers me personally is his admiration for authoritarian leaders like Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. So sometimes you feel always like, oh, I wish I could do that. So there is that. It's true. There's an authoritarian streak in Donald Trump that is you can see. I mean, it would be foolish to ignore that. But on the other hand, I mean, the criticism of him was so bizarrely overblown and crazy that they did a bad thing to their own cause as well, because he was so over the top. For one example, I mean, the fact that he had a rally in Madison Square Garden, which, of course, is the home of the New York Knicks, and Hillary Clinton spoke there, and John F. Kennedy spoke there, and like everybody speaks there. But Donald Trump goes there, and now they say he's a Nazi because in the year 1939, there was a Nazi rally in Madison Square Garden. And it is completely unrelated, had nothing to do with Donald Trump. But in the thing, MSNBC showed black and white images of that Nazi rally in a split screen with Donald Trump's rally going on in end of October. So that's where the media went. It was hysterical. So I don't know. He's not Adolf Hitler, and we'll see. But to be watchful in this regard is probably a good idea.
So let me come to the closing question in that sense. If you look, since you're a child of two continents by now, if you look at the United States and you look at Europe, what is something that we could learn from the United States, we Europeans, but what could the Americans also learn from us? If you look at the two systems.
I think Europeans can learn a lot from the American positiveness. They always try to overcome things, looking forward, trying to make the best out of things. It's sort of instilled in them. I found sometimes in Europe it's always like, you just swim with the others, stay in the middle. Here and there's more thriving. The wish to thrive, to better yourself, to move forward, to take more risk, maybe. That's also something I noticed here in the US, because sometimes they have to, because it's the social net, even though it exists, is less comfortable than it is otherwise. So people really do have to sometimes struggle harder to make it, and this also makes them to take more risk. What American can learn from Europe is I know infrastructure. Maybe I'm living here 25 years in New York, and the subway is a joke, and it will never. Now I know it will never change. I mean, the entire this is the richest country in the world, which is built on a crumbling infrastructure that makes you. I mean, you enter Penn Station in Manhattan, you feel like not like a glorious traveler entering one of the most important cities of the world. You feel like a dog coming into the city in this maze of underground tunnels, and so that's. what I miss a little bit here in the US is that the European idea of public places should be nice, like sort of have a pride of yourself, of your city and stuff. Here is sometimes it's like, well, we don't want to spend money on this, to keep streets clean or to keep them well maintained or something like that. There's obviously maybe less tax revenue and stuff. So, make America prettier again, I would say. We could learn from Europe.
Make it not only great again, but make it pretty again. That would be a nice statement. And for the last cliche that we always say about the Americans, that they have no culture, what do you say to that?
Well, I mean, that's debatable. I mean, sure, there's many people in America who don't really like culture a lot, and I think there's many people in Europe who don't like culture a lot. I mean, it depends where you are. Look, New York City is one of the most important cultural places in the world and in the US. Other places, you go to small rural communities. I mean, they're not going to watch an opera on Saturday night. Sure, they go to the sports bar, but I wouldn't generalize in this respect. I think there are cultured people on both sides of the Atlantic.
They say about you, New York, once you make it there, you make it everywhere, to use Frank Sinatra's quote. Are you going to make it anywhere else, or are you going to stay in the United States until you finally bid farewell to this world?
Well, I sometimes I feel I missed the exit or something. Of course, in New York City is one of the most expensive cities in the world, and it literally bankrupted me, especially growing up, not realizing that, the industry I'm in is not that flourishing that it used to be, obviously, and New York. And that's also, that's for me, prices really went crazy. I think a lot of Europeans would be shocked, or they are shocked when they come to make vacation in New York, that you walk away from having a coffee and a croissant and you pay $12 for it. It's absolutely insane. And, but, so far I'm here. My kids are here. For me, it's home, like, I don't know. I still feel when people ask me, like, I'm Austrian, which I am. I'm Austrian living in America, and that will not change. But I feel okay. I feel at home here.
But maybe it's the same statement when you say $12 for croissant, for coffee. That's not so much difference between to Vienna. If you go to whatever Café Museum or Landmann or something like that, you pay easily for a Sacher cake and a coffee, 10 euros, 12 euros.
Well, congratulations, then you're leveled with crazy American, crazy New York prices. Yeah. Well.
Yeah, unfortunately. Well, it's also a world capital by now, right? Maybe that's one thing we definitely have in common. Okay. Herbert, thanks very much. I hope you have still some great time over there, and it would be great, nevertheless, once you're back in Austria, to see you in person. Two Austrians meeting finally in Austria again.
Oh, yeah, that would be great. Yes, of course. Okay, it was really great talking to you. Great questions.
Thank you, likewise.